Nice to meet everyone, and thank you for having me. So my name is Cosme Mosneron Dupin, so two silent S's. It's a very French name. And yeah, I work at l'Océan in Sorbonne Université with Jean-Baptiste Salé and Casimir de Lavergne. And today I'll talk you through what I did during the first 2 years of my PhD. And yeah, let's go. So my interest from up to now has mostly been in measuring the sea level anomalies in the Southern Ocean, but both in the open ocean and in the ice-covered Southern Ocean. So I guess as most of you know, sea level anomalies, it's a really important variable when doing oceanography. So it gives you like an integrated measure of what happens in the water column, both density-wise and mass-wise. And with it, you can also reconstruct the large-scale currents with the geostrophic balance. So we're very interested in sea level anomaly. But in the Southern Ocean, it's not always possible to get them because the sea ice blocks the sea surface from the satellite side. So here you have an example of a classic altimetry product from DUAX, and you have in dark here in black the sea ice limit. And as you can see, when we have sea ice, we have much less data. And so my work up until now has been to go beyond this limit and produce the longest sea level anomaly product possible. So the way we go around this physical limit of sea ice, we do that by using actually the signal that comes from the leads, which are holes in the sea ice cover. Uh, I'm going to do a bit of science history now, but so we have known for a long time that the lead signal is very different from the sea ice signal. It's much more specular, and meanwhile the sea ice produces a much more diffusive echo when you look at it from satellites and from a satellite. So this was shown in this paper from Drinkwater in 1990. So basically, they mounted an altimeter on a plane. They went over sea ice, and they colocalized then waveforms. So basically, the altimeter sends a wave to the surface, and it then records the echo that the surface gives back. And from that you can derive the time it took for the waveform to go back and forth, and you can get then the distance between either the satellite or here the plane, and then get the sea level variations. So they did that with a plane and an altimeter, and colocalized waveforms, so echoes, with where they were uh, compared to the surface. And so here you have the echo 2 and 3 are above a flow, and you see it's much less peaky than the echo 1, who was above a mix of flow and water. And so we've known for a long time that leads, so holes in the sea ice, produce very peaky signals. And at some point, someone in 1994, that's the oldest occurrence I could find, said that we could maybe use that to measure sea surface topography. And he actually did so 10 years later with a first paper that gave like a climatology of the sea surface anomalies in the Arctic. And 20 years, 30 years now, we are still doing using the same principle to get the sea level anomalies. So here it's what we do actually today. So it's a bit more precise. You have here the satellite imprint, and here you have the energy that of the echoes being recorded. And when it goes above a lead, so all in the sea ice, it will give a much stronger echo, much more peaky. So it will happen right now. And that's how we know that we're above a lead and that we can actually measure what happens in the sea at that time. So yeah, building on that, we reprocessed four satellite missions, so treating their lead data, and we are able now to so we produce now a sea level anomaly product that spans from 2003 to 2021. So I'm not the first one to do that. Some other teams did so previously, but it was a shorter time series, shorter products. And here we have the longest time series available as of now, so spanning from 2003 to 2021. So I'll show you here the product that we have now. So on the left, it's a classic altimetry product limited by CIs, and on the right, it's the product that we developed. And as you can see, so we gain much more information when we have a CIs cover. And so a couple of comments is that the sea level field appears continuous between the open ocean domain and the sea ice covered domain. And overall, we are pretty pleased with how the product looks. So this was a previous version. We made some improvement and we've added a smoothing scheme because it looks a bit patchy. But just here is to give you an example of what is integrated into the product that you saw under the hood. So it's also a way for us to validate the product. So here you have a along track. So it's basically all the sea level anomalies that have been measured by the satellites along this track here, the track B. In blue, we have open ocean data points, and in red, we have leads data points, so observation above the sea ice cover. And here on the right, it's an image obtained with the same satellite, and we collocated the points here in orange. We collocated their position on this image. And so if we look a bit closer, we can see that usually the leads, the observation that we have correspond actually to openings in the CS cover. So it's not always the case. Like for example, here in the point 3, we don't seem to be able we don't actually see well a lead. So sometimes, yeah, of course there are some mistakes, but it's yeah the best I think that we can do. It's quite tricky because to differentiate because so if a leads form, so open water and then it freezes super quickly, it will have the same specular waveform. So we can't really differentiate between the two. So it has some limitation, but as I said, I think it's the best that we can do right now. And here we try to validate the products. So first we compare as I said, we have 4 different missions, satellite missions. And so each satellite mission is independent from another, and their processing are also independent. And so the first way to validate the product is to compare what happens between the mission and see if they agree or not. So this is a first comparison between Envisat and Cryosat on their on the time span that they share in common, and we have a good correlation between the two time series. This is the average sea level anomalies south of 60 degrees south, so usually most of the time ice covered, and we can see that the time series matches. And here it's for the Sentinel-3, Cryosat, and Saral, and once again we have a good match. So it's a first validation of the product. What we do also is that we compare so along track data from one satellite, here Sentinel-3, with maps made from other satellites too. So Saral Altica here and Cryosat here. We do that because we don't actually have enough points to do what we call a crossover analysis, and so this is kind of a makeshift crossover analysis. And we interpolate the maps value on the along track position and compare the two values. And this is the root mean square error that we obtain in the end. So around 4 centimeters of error in the ice covered regions, but also 4 centimeters on average in the open ocean. And so the fact that the two metrics matches, open ocean and ice covered region, give us good confidence in what we do in the ice covered regions. And lastly, our last way of validating the product is to compare it to in situ observations. And so we have 2 sources of in situ observations. So tide gauges. Here you have the location of the tide gauges we use. They are the stars on the map. So I actually don't I couldn't find any in the Bellingshausen and Amundsen, but maybe I didn't look enough. And so we compare here what the product says in orange with with one in situ observation in blue. So this is the highest the comparison with the highest correlation coefficient, and this is the comparison with the lowest correlation coefficient. And this is here the like an aggregation of all data points from the tide gauges, and which gives us in the end a R square of R of 0.57. So it's of we don't get some of the extreme values here, for example, but we seem to be able to capture well so the oscillations and the seasonal cycle, which we're pretty happy about because the tide gauge is not necessarily I mean the a lot of local phenomena can affect the tide gauge measurements, which can't be captured by the satellite. And we did the same with bottom pressure recorders, which are the points circled here, the circles here. Once again, I couldn't find any in the Amundsen Bellingshausen. And once again, we compare them with our altimetry product. And overall, the match, they match relatively well. It's never perfect, but we're satisfied with it. So yeah, and this is just an estimate of the product uncertainty. So we use what we call the formal error of our interpolation scheme to obtain the final product. So it's basically the variance of the product, but at short time scale and length scale. And so overall, we have an uncertainty of around 2 centimeters in the ice covered ocean, which is more or less the same compared to the open ocean ocean open ocean. I'll go over that. And so yeah, we now have a SLA product that is consistent in both open ocean and ice covered region of the Southern Ocean, going from 2003 to 2021. Our validation items gave us face in the product. And the product would actually be made available by the end of the week, and the presentation paper will be submitted. And now I'll show a few examples of short analysis I did with the product. So in the yeah, circumpolarly and in the Bellingshausen also. So it's very descriptive. I did that when I knew when I was contacted for this talk, but so it's going to be very descriptive because we just finished actually producing the product. So one of the first thing we look at the product.
Just to let you know, you have about 2 minutes
Ah,
left or so. You have
yeah,
about 2 minutes
okay,
left.
yeah, great, okay. One of the first thing we did with the product is look at the sea level anomaly trend that we have here, and we try to explain it using both estimates of the steric height change, which we did using a, a gridded product, the EAP product. So this is here the steric change that we have. And we have here the geostatic effect on the sea level anomaly trend estimated from Grace. And this is the sum of the two. And then and the idea was to see if we could explain the whole SLA trend with those two components. And so it's not a perfect fit, but we can see some global patterns in common. For example, here we have a negative anomaly, and here in the we have next close to the coast a higher sea level rise that we found also here. So I mean, it's not a perfect match, but it's a good first approach, let's say. Here is what happens more into the Bellingshausen and Amundsen Sea. So here we have the steric change plus grace plus geostatic change, and here the sea level anomalies trend. And we can see that we don't find this negative anomaly in our product. So I don't know why, but we need to look a bit more into it. But other than that, here the order of magnitude seem to match. And here is just the seasonal cycle of SLA in the Bellingshausen and Amundsen that we have. in our product. So next, close to the coast, we have higher sea level anomalies during spring and lower during autumn, and during uh, winter and summer, we have yeah, a transition between those two states with some patches of positive and negative anomalies. And this is the first two EOF that I can find when I look at the SLF field in this region. So the first two modes explain 35% and 16% of the variance. And the second one seem to kind of put into contrast what happens on the shelf and what happens off the shelf. And yeah, finally, what we did also as of now with the product is look at the variability of the gyres. So we had an approach, our approach was to find the largest close contour of a dynamic of ADT, so absolute dynamic topography. And we saw an important variability of of the area of the Ross gyre, and also eastern expansion from time to time of this gyre that occurs primarily in the spring. So I just talked about this because maybe it could be of interest to the Amundsen. But to conclude, so yeah, most of my work was on producing this SLA product. We are now kind of exploring it to see what we can do with it. I think there's plenty of things to do, and hopefully this product can be of use to you. And yeah, thank you for your attention, and please reach out if you're interested in the product.
Amazing. Thanks, Ko.